Now, researchers in Kenya have decided to map out the animal feeds industry structure, nature, its players, and its challenges. They found that feed producers and raw material suppliers are concentrated in and around the capital, Nairobi, and the central regions of the country. Now, this has been attributed to the commercial dairy and poultry populations, as well as the availability of industrial infrastructure, roads, water, and electric power. The concentration of feed producers and raw material suppliers in and around urban areas has resulted in high transportation costs and high sales prices of the products in rural areas. Now, this could also be the reason for the proliferation of many small and medium millers to fill that gap. Well, let's take a closer look at some of their findings. We're joined now by Kamau Kuria. He's the CEO of Kenya's Markets Trust. Welcome to the studio, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's start with the feed sector. We know that Kenya just came from probably the worst drought it's ever experienced. We know that it resulted in the cost of animal feed doubling in the market. So give us a sense of what state the industry is in right now.
Of course, the drought has had a devastating effect. And the first thing is really around just simple availability. If you don't have feed, you don't get milk, cows die, and so you find the fluctuation even in supply of milk because of the issue of feed. The other issue is just cost. 80% of the costs of dairy production are around feed and fodder. So you can imagine what kind of an effect the drought would then have. But even with feed available, quality then becomes a very big issue, especially since most feed is made from byproducts of maize and wheat, which are of course the same food that human beings want to eat. So it becomes a big challenge. Do you feed people or do you feed your animals? And then as you try and get alternatives, you find that the qualities then go down. Quality of feed really goes down. Yes. Yes.
So the current state of the sector is prices are extremely high and it's hard for farmers to access these things.
Correct. That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Well, we do know that you did a study, or Kenya's Markets Trust did a study on this, which of course addressed some of those critical challenges in the sector. Give us a sense of some of your findings.
The first thing is, because of the issue of cost, what's tended to happen is some of the larger farmers then start trying to do their own milling, their own production of feed. Then they find that they can sell some of it. The same thing happens with portion millers who are primarily initially milling for human beings. They find that they can start producing feed. So you start getting a huge proliferation of small-scale producers. 90% of the people in our study of the companies were, or even individuals, were small-scale. Quality issues. Although the technology around milling is not high technology, you then find, because a lot of the equipment has been made in Juakali or locally, the quality issues become very serious. As people try and do formulations, because feed is very sensitive to how you formulate the feed, and then continuous analysis. As you keep changing your byproducts, and the quality goes down. And immediately you find quality going down, you're going to find that production is going down. So quality issues, cost issues, and a lot of, then there are issues around regulation. We found that 70% of raw material suppliers, for example, do not certify their product. And 43% of manufacturers do not certify their products. So the farmer doesn't really even know what they're getting, because they don't have the capacity to be able to test what they're actually being given by these manufacturers and raw material suppliers. So it becomes a very difficult thing. And because a lot of these small producers are outside the ambit of regulation, it's a fairly chaotic state of affairs. And that's what we've been finding. Yes.
So what are your recommendations then? Is it more regulation in the sector? Where exactly do you think the solutions lie?
There are a couple of areas. The first thing is, of course, it's not regulation in the negative sense. We've got a big capacity, especially in the Kenya Bureau of Standards, in terms of being able to support, in terms of analyzing and so on. But the first thing is, the manufacturers have to be actually registered. And so we found a big challenge in terms of our recommendations, that the KEBS, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and other regulators have to give more information and show the benefits to manufacturers and raw material suppliers, so that they can actually come out and be registered and be able to receive the kind of support that they can get. The other thing is around getting alternatives to some of the feeds. So instead of using, let's say, maize and wheat, we start looking at some other alternatives, maybe things like cassava, sorghum, which of course also in some cases, especially like cassava, tend to be more drought resistant, more climate change resistant.
Right.
So you start getting better availability. The supply chains are also long. So we were looking and recommending that some of the supply chains need to be shortened so that there are less intermediaries between the manufacturer and the consumer, the farmer,
right.
Especially in the rural areas. Yes, yes.
Now, one thing you did talk about earlier is the fact that there's so many players in the sector now that their prices are so high. We're seeing farmers even trying to create their own fodder right now. So give us a sense, isn't this good for competition in the sector? Give us a sense of your recommendations for sort of organizing the sector going forward.
Well, competition is good, yes, for markets.
Right.
But it's got to be competition where you're not also compromising things like quality and standards are kept high. So really, if we start getting the alternatives in terms of the raw materials, if we start getting more of these competitors, these small-scale producers certified so that they increase their technical capacity and get better support from the regulators, we start getting more certification so that the consumer can start identifying the quality of what they're actually buying and they're guaranteed in terms of what they're getting, then we will start getting somewhere. So those are really some of the things that we would push for. Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there, but thanks for joining us in the studio. Thank you for your insights.
Okay.
Of course, that was Kamau Kuria. He's the CEO of Kenya's Markets Trust.